Welcome to the Business of Story podcast, where the world's best storytellers from business, Hollywood, and beyond teach you how to use stories to communicate and connect with your customers. The Business of Story is sponsored by ACT, the best-selling customer management software for small business, Oracle Marketing Cloud, enabling businesses to target, engage, convert, analyze, and use marketing technology to deliver a better customer experience. Sixter, helping clients maximize the impact of every single email sent. And by Signal Labs, the real-time cross-media story tracking platform. Here's your host, Park Howell from Park & Co. And today's special Business of Story guest.
Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome back to Business of Story and another amazing episode. And this one is particularly poignant for me because, number one, it took me a while to track down our guest, and I had to go through Twitter and some people there that connected me with them. But number two, more importantly, in my own journey around the story cycle, Joseph Campbell, the movie that he made, Finding Joe, has been probably the most pivotal movie that I've watched or resource that I had that really launched me into my journey. And I watched it several times. And it's a documentary about Joseph Campbell, but more important, it's about how do we use the teaching from Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey in our own lives so that we can create stories that we can live into that are really powerful and epic in their own ways. And I found this connection back when, as many of you know, our son was going to film school in Hollywood. He was at Chapman University, and he introduced me to Joseph Campbell, and I started reading all this stuff. In about 2011, this movie came out and hit me right upside the head. And the one thing that I've always taken from Joseph Campbell's work is when he says, when you follow your bliss, doors will open where there were only walls before. And the one thing that I've experienced in this is I didn't even know there were walls, or I didn't even know what path that I should be taking and where that path was going to be taking me. But when I saw this movie, it just absolutely resonated with me. Everything I had been learning and studying about Joseph Campbell through what Hollywood knew about it, and then this amazing movie that came out from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And it was just, my world just started coming together. And I got to tell you, it's just like what Campbell says. You follow your bliss, and mine happens to be understanding why creativity works in our lives, and more importantly, how do we use story to impact our lives and impact the lives of those around us through our brands and how we express our business leadership in our communications creativity through the use of an intentional structure like the hero's journey. So, Finding Joe, right now, you got to write that down because when you're done listening to this, I'm going to give you the same homework assignment I give to every one of my workshops is you just have to watch it. It's a delightful movie. It gives you an insight into Campbell. It makes his work very embraceable, very approachable. Some of his other work, his academic work, is kind of hard to get through the weeds on, but this one is really incredible. And that all goes to and is a testament to the director, Pat Solomon. And like I said, I had to do some digging. I finally tracked him down. I've got him here for you today. Our Business of Story program is almost a year old, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to track you down. But it's so great to have you here, Pat. And I'd like to welcome you, Pat Solomon, the filmmaker behind Finding Joe, to Business of Story.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And sorry it was so hard to track me down.
We got to work on your marketing, I guess.
We do, definitely. I'm not the greatest at marketing. I'm a filmmaker.
Well, you're in Venice Beach, California, and
Yep.
You are making lots of films. You're also in the advertising trade. So
Yep.
Give us a little bit about your backstory. And I'm really curious how someone who's very busy in the advertising trade, comes to then commit so much of your life to create this amazing documentary.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting story, even for me when I think about it. You know, I was first introduced to Campbell kind of late high school, maybe right out of high school, when the Bill Moyers interviews came out. And if you're not familiar with those, Bill Moyers interviewed Joseph Campbell at the Skywalker Ranch, George Lucas's place. Campbell was a big influencer on George Lucas when he was creating Star Wars. And when I watched those interviews, I was hooked. It really, I mean, Campbell's a mythologist, but really what spoke to me was the idea that stories, that your life unfolds like a story, and that through stories you are connected to, you're connected to yourself and your society and the people around you, and then the idea of following your bliss. That idea really hit me hard and kind of influenced the way that my life unfolded. So I was pretty young, and I at that point knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I started shooting the things that I love to do. I was a skateboarder and I was into snowboarding, and so I started shooting films of that nature, and kind of graduated into doing commercials later. But I always wanted to do a Campbell movie because I loved his work so much. I just never knew what it was going to be like, or how it was going to unfold for me. I put it off, thought about it, and then went to the back of my mind and, I got to make money. I got to further my career. And, those things came up.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear, the Bill Moyers special you're talking about is that 6-part series on PBS, and they had a resulting book that came out of that called The Power of Myth, which
Yes.
I also recommend to people that it's the most approachable Campbell reading you can do. I call it mythology for the layperson, and it certainly was for me, that I've been through that book several times, and they're just absolute gems in that book. And that's based on the PBS series with Bill Moyers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, actually. And just to back up for a second, what you said about Campbell's work is very true. That if you read his most important work, or his most famous work, which is Hero with a Thousand Faces, that's a difficult read, And I consider myself a Campbell nerd. Like, I've read everything that he's written, and I still have to read his sentences 2 or 3 times to get them, because it's very kind of early century writing.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, the Power of Myth, I thought is a great way to get into it. And then I'll talk about it in a bit here, but that's another reason why I created Finding Joe.
So with your background, you had created a lot of video film work with sort of adventure sports, I guess, skateboarding.
Yeah, that was kind of Campbell's idea. Like when I started, I really took to the idea that, if you focus on the thing that brings you the most joy, and at that time it was skateboarding and snowboarding and filmmaking, and I didn't really worry about money or where it was taking me. I was just so into doing what I was doing, and that idea or philosophy came directly from Campbell.
And what do you say to people that say, oh, that's all well and good. My father tells me that. My mother tells me that. My grandmother says to focus on that. Why do you feel that it's so poignant in your life? Or can you give us an example of how that's worked by simply doing that, focusing on what you love, what brings you joy?
Yeah, I mean, I say the biggest example is actually making the movie. So at the point at which I was decided to make the film, I was having a couple pretty big crises in my life. I was having a pretty major and cliche American midlife crisis, and then right in the middle of that, both of my parents died within 3 weeks. It was actually a really horrible time in my life. But out of that, all the kind of the only like little bit of hope I had was going back to what was the thing that brings me joy. And what was my bliss at that point? And it was so difficult to tell because I was in such turmoil. But this Campbell movie popped into my head at that point. I went, I've been thinking about making this movie for a long time. And maybe this is the time, like I'll just take a step and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of put the pieces together a little bit, and I went, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and start the process. And so I got on my computer and started looking for, who would I interview? And right then I started seeing things that I had never seen before. Like I was standing in line at Starbucks and this guy had a Follow Your Bliss t-shirt on. I had never seen that before. And then there was another one, there was a bumper sticker, a Follow Your Bliss bumper sticker. And I was like, oh my God, are you trying to tell me something? What's happening here? And then when I made the decision, I said, okay, I'm going to stop doing commercials, and I'm going to focus solely on this project until it's done. And at that point, it was unbelievable, the synchronicities that happened. Like the second I decided to do that, people and opportunities came out of the woodwork. It seems like every time I made a phone call, someone would go, "Oh my God, yes, I know that guy. You could, here's his number, call him." And I was getting emails from people saying, "Hey, I heard you were making a Campbell movie. Can I help?" And it was quite an extraordinary experience.
And you had some pretty interesting characters within the movie too. Tony Hawk, right?
Right. So those are great examples. So Tony Hawk was kind of through a friend of a friend, just kind of, and I knew because I skateboard and I snowboard and surf and that's kind of my world. I wanted to have those represented in the film. And yeah, I mean, he was on my list, but I didn't really pursue him, but my friend said, "Hey, there's an opportunity to shoot Tony Hawk if you wanted to do it." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it, like tomorrow. Let's go." Mm-hmm. So, and he, to be honest, and I had a feeling this was the case. He didn't know who Campbell was, obviously never heard of him, and I love that idea because he's a perfect example of someone who just went out and did what he wanted to do. I mean, he just skateboarded all day. And so he kind of followed his bliss into the success that he's had. And I knew that he would echo or mirror the same ideas that people like the Campbell Foundation president, Robert Walter, was talking about mythology and following your bliss in the same way that Tony Hawk was, which I thought was quite extraordinary, the way they lined up.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting group, too, because you also have Mick Fleetwood, a Fleetwood Mac fame in there.
Right. That's another one that was just, we're talking to a friend who was also at that point going through a bit of a crisis. And he says, "Oh, my uncle, Mick Fleetwood, gave me these tapes." He gave him the Bill Moyers tapes, actually the actual tapes or CDs, and said, "Here, you should drive around the island listening to these things and it'll clear your head." And so he said, "Oh my goodness, my uncle is a big Campbell fan, and he would love to participate in your film."
So it just all started coming together, and
it really all started coming together. It was amazing.
And I will tell you, Pat, I've had that same experience in my life, especially when I pivoted away from being a traditional ad agency into pursuing and teaching about story structure. And again, your film had a big impact on me. But when I started following this, it was like, yeah, the universe is saying, "Dude, this is what you're supposed to be doing." Yeah. So as it was like shutting down my agency for me, it was opening up doors for me. So for instance, not only did I shop your film around for you, I was probably its greatest promoter for a long time. There still am.
I love that.
But then the next thing I know is I found myself literally on the 40th floor of Hearst Media in Manhattan. And this is coming from out of Phoenix. I get a call out of nowhere, and I'm invited to come out and participate in a 40-person round table session on media and the world of sustainability and how communication can do a better job of that. So here I am sitting in Hearst Media with publishers and writers of really some amazing publications, and I get up and I talk about what I found in this power of story and how I have found that it works with our clients. That then led to, or not that particular thing, but following on the heels of that, Arizona State University shows up, says, "Hey, we love what you're doing with story. Can you write a curriculum around it?" I started teaching, have been teaching now for 3 years, an executive master's program. Never taught in my life. And now I'm teaching an executive master's program at ASU, working with executives around the world, using story in their lives to help advance social causes further, faster within organizations like Bayer Pharmaceutical, Cummins Diesel, American Express. I mean, really like mind-blowing stuff that I would never thought I would have been there in 2008, 2009, when I had just gotten on my path to studying this. Now, I got it, and then that led to going to Robert McKee's story seminar in LA for 4 days, which then led to a personal invite from Robert to come out to Connecticut and do a podcast from his living room. I mean, this guy didn't know me from Adam and had an interest in what I was doing, and here I was with one of the most legendary screenwriting coaches, simply because I went down this crazy path. Now, the final thing, the punctuation to all this, you'll love it, Pat. 2 years ago, on October 30th, I was a keynote speaker for a local transportation organization here in Arizona. And again, I was invited in to talk about how does story impact the lives of transportation leaders and thinking about the journeys that their customers literally are on from home to office and back again, and how could we reframe that in the power of story. Well, while I was getting ready to go on that stage, the lights started flickering in the ballroom. They'd come on, they would slowly go off, they would come on. It was like the place was haunted. And when I stood up on stage, it occurred to me that that day, October 30th, was it 2014, was 24 years, the anniversary of Joseph Campbell's death. So I had to use that as, hey, man, Joseph Campbell's here in the room with us, and he simply doesn't want to miss the party, and he's winking at me because he was a big part of that presentation. So that's my long-winded or several stories way of going about what you cover in this amazing movie. Finding Joe absolutely impacts us on a very basal personal level and a professional level.
Yeah, it's amazing how... It's amazing to me how it works, and it never ceases to amaze me when I hear other stories like that. It just when you and it affirms, there's kind of a faith in the journey. When you take a step forward and you commit to your path, your bliss, that the universe kind of matches you with a step forward.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. From what you've learned in this process of creating Finding Joe, how have you since applied it in your own work? Or do you have some ideas for how our listeners can apply this sort of universal structure to story to live into more powerful lives and create more powerful work for their clients?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, it really comes down to kind of having faith in the journey, right? So when things get difficult, I just have faith that this challenge is here for a reason, and that there's kind of light at the other side of it, and I'm going to be fine, as opposed to just rolling over and going, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? I just kind of see it as, the metaphorical idea is the dragon battle. I kind of see it as the we're going to have this struggle, but it's going to make me understand something, and it's necessary right now, and I'll get through it.
Mm-hmm. So how you must have experienced that when you were creating the movie itself. So you had to have this leap of faith to, okay, well, I'm not going to make some money for a while, but I'm going to create this thing, and maybe even question the marketability of it, given that that people don't know about. Can you cover that a little bit for us?
It was really scary. I mean, it was crazy scary. And that's what I try to talk to people about that who ask me this kind of question is for me anyway, and I'm sure most people are like this if you're starting a business or you have an idea that you'd like to pursue, or any kind of life change. For me, this was huge. Like, I had to stop working, and I'm just coming off the heels of a midlife crisis. You can see how my wife probably wasn't too stoked about that. You know what I mean? Like, it was pretty tense around the house, but I had to do it. I was kind of called to do this, and I felt this kind of excitement or joy the way that I had when I made my very first film ever. And I just knew I was on the right path. So yeah, when I took that step and I got feedback that I'm on the right path, like, this feels great, I just now have faith that those things will happen.
So you must have, like in every hero's journey, had that all is lost moment where you were in the middle of producing and directing this thing, and you're like, oh my God, this thing's going to blow up on me.
Right. So this was my, I had a lot of great synchronicities, but I also had a lot of great failures, or just roadblocks that were pretty big. And I'll share with you the biggest one, which is, this is self-funded. Like, did the things you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to spend your own money, which I did. Mortgage the house, the whole deal, and I hadn't taken a job for a while, and you work in the ad business, so you know how competitive it is. And so now, instead of shooting commercials, I'm telling those clients that, hey, I'm not available, and other guys are coming in and taking my clients. So it was a huge risk that I was taking. And I get to this point about a year into it. I'd gone all over the world. I'd shot interviews here and there, and I shot in Bali and in Italy, and I had shot all these castles and religious sites, and I put the first cut together, and it was awful. It was unwatchably bad. I mean, it was a piece of crap. And I had this moment where I went, oh my God, I'm a total failure. Like, I just like used my own money on this, put my family in financial jeopardy, put my career in jeopardy, and I have nothing to show for it, less than nothing. So that particular crisis was pretty deep, and it was one of those like soul searching, what am I doing with my life?
So what'd you do?
So in the midst of that, this is another lesson that I learned along the way, which is no matter how big the crisis, if you can find one little step to take, you can find a way out of it. I was just paralyzed, but the one step I could take, like the one move I had on the chessboard was I knew people would tell stories. I knew every single person would have a story, whether it was a personal one, or maybe they would tell a fable. And I knew I was going to use these kids to kind of reenact or tell that story in a visual way. So there was a couple stories that were told, and I said, well, we don't really have anything else to do at this point. Let's shoot these and we'll piece them in and just see how it goes. In the back of my mind going, oh man, this is a piece of crap. I don't know how we're going to save this. And I went out and shot one story that's actually not in the film. But we got the edit back, and it was freaking amazing. It was like the God rays came down and, the heavens were parted, and it was like, this is the path. So at that moment we went, okay, well, this is working. Why don't we use the kids for the entire movie, and we'll create a story that interweaves through the story. And Campbell's favorite myth was the Grail myth, and let's use that. And creatively, it unfolded, in one of those ways that was just, there were no obstacles at that point. It was like a race to the finish.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of filmmakers go through that, and there's that harrowing part of the middle of the project that nothing seems to be coming together, and they're like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. How am I going to possibly pull this off and feed myself at the same time? So you experienced sort of that mythical journey that it seems like everybody goes through when they are on an epic adventure, such as making a feature film like this.
Yeah, I would call that moment the belly of the whale, definitely. The deepest, darkest cave moment.
The belly of the whale. With that, Pat, I'd like to stop here so that our sponsors can share their stories. But when we come back, I want to talk about the why, because I think it's really interesting. I'd like to learn more about why did you shed everything you were doing to focus on this one project. And in fact, on the website at findingjoethemovie.com, the first Joseph Campbell quote you use is, we must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. I'd like to explore that with you in your life in the creation of this piece right after these messages. Hey, if you like what you're hearing here on Business of Story, then you are going to love Definitive, the email from Convince and Convert that many marketers say is the most useful resource around. Each day, the team at Convince and Convert picks a topic and sends you the 3 best resources ever created about that topic. It's topical, it's timely, it's useful, so go to definitivedigest.com and subscribe for free right now. Hey, I've got a question for you. What's the best call to action button color on your website? Yeah, you probably didn't see that one coming, did you? Well, what's the best shape and sizes of your CTA buttons? And what copy gets more clicks? These questions have interrupted my sleep patterns for weeks now, until I downloaded a helpful new email marketing guide from Emma called Why We Click, the Psychology Behind a Great Call to Action. You'll learn how applying just a little bit of brain science can transform your CTA buttons into small but mighty conversion powerhouses. It covers the button color, copy, and placement that helps skyrocket click rates. Check it out at myemma.com/click. Emma helps marketers everywhere send smart, stylish email newsletters, promotions, and automated campaigns, and to help us all rest a little easier knowing our email marketing is doing its job. So check out their new publication at myemma.com/click. Welcome back to Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and we have an amazing guest here with us today, Pat Solomon. He is the director, filmmaker behind one of my favorite movies, Finding Joe. Movie is all about a bit of a documentary about Joseph Campbell, America's foremost mythologist, his work with the hero's journey. But I think maybe more importantly, it's also a movie that shows us how do we use this journey, how do we recognize this universal structure of the story in our own lives so that we can be more intentional about the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories we design for ourselves, and the stories that we can live into so that we live much greater journeys that are more in kind with what we are really all about on an individual basis. So now, Pat, you had a very successful advertising career going before this movie. You basically followed Joseph Campbell's advice. We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us, which means you got to tear it all down and start all over in some respects, or pivot off of what you're doing and jump into the middle of this. Can you share with us that moment when you knew you had to do this, and why did you have to do this movie?
I did, because there was like a really clear moment. And like I was saying before, this was kind of born out of a crisis. And so I had, and when both of my parents passed away, I was in a really deep, dark place emotionally. And I couldn't get the film out of my head at that point. This was an idea that had been brewing for about, oh my goodness, 10 years at least or more. And I, on many levels, like one, I saw it as a way out of emotional distress. I saw getting into a project and devoting everything I have emotionally to a project would somehow distract me from my current pain or crisis. But also, I think at some level, with when both of my parents passed, I went, "Hey, you're not getting any younger, and you too are going to be gone someday. And what are you here to do? Like, what are you going to leave to the world? A bunch of, ads? Don't you have something better to offer?" So there was a few, internal voices going on in my head that made me go, okay, I got to do this thing, or else, if it's not now, it's going to be never.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when that went down?
Oh my goodness. That was 2009, 2008-ish. I'm 48 now, 10 years. So, late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah. Yeah. So you still had a lot of your career ahead of you. I had Michael Hyatt on the show last week, a very famous publisher and now a virtual mentor. He pivoted out of his CEO at his publishing company when he was 55, and now he's 60, and he's got a very strong company going. But to me, it reflects that same sort of concept that I asked him, when was that moment when you didn't want to do this anymore? And he said, in a boardroom. I remember being in a board meeting, and I just said, I can't do this anymore. And so he literally had to do the same thing, willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. But even that is a big jump in faith, is it not?
It's these are these things, life is full of these little jumps and little jumps. But what you're talking about, and for what happened, that sounds like for him and for me as well, was kind of a big leap of faith, to make a career change or, a life change. Those things can be very, they can stick you, because your life can be comfortable and you don't want to leave that comfort. So it's great for him that he was able to go, I can't take this anymore. Like, this isn't me. This doesn't speak to me. This doesn't sing to me. And at some level, it maybe this is killing me. And I don't know, to be able to get out of that, in my opinion, takes this great leap of faith. Like, I know, might not be great right away, but I know I'm going to take this step and I'm doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not, then at least I'm getting away from the thing that's killing me.
Mm-hmm. So, Pat, immersing you in story and story structure, all of the Finding Joe movie, has that made you a better storyteller? And how are you using some of the things you've learned, or what are the things you have learned, and how are you using them in your own craft?
I would say that, creatively, it's great to be able to, and I was a Campbell fan already, so I felt like I was pretty well versed in it, but every time I interviewed someone, I learned some amazing new things, and sitting down with the Campbell folks certainly was extremely enlightening. And so when I came away from the film, I know I just felt like I had a better understanding of story and where things should be structured. And, in telling a commercial or shooting a commercial, especially, those things are extremely important.
Yeah, can you give us some examples? You have 2 or 3 tips that you seen, guidelines that you follow that we could learn from?
God, it's a tough. To me, they're more subtle. Like I just felt like I understood conflict a little better. Do you put conflict, and how do you propose conflict, and how do you resolve it? Those things to me seemed a little more obvious. I would say as far as on a personal level, my biggest takeaway on a personal level was, we talk about the hero's journey so much, and it's this struggle, and you pick up your sword and you fight, and you're achieving something. And the best moments along the way for me, and are now more than ever, are the moments where I give to somebody, where I help somebody on their journey, where I get to be like a Yoda figure, or a mentor to somebody, and that to me seems equally as important as completing my own journey.
Yeah, you are becoming the mentor, the guide, as he talks about, to the hero of the journey, which is the actual person, the person whose story you're helping them through. Experience.
Right. And I now try to look at people. It's so easy to get focused on your own journey, but if you look at everyone around you, everyone you talk to or meet, they are on their own journey. Like they're trying to achieve something, get something, complete a journey, questing for something, and if you can help them along their way, even in a little bit or in a big way, it just feels better. It just feels good. It's a good way to go about my journey these days.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm jumping around in the journey here, story a little bit on purpose, because I just, things keep popping to me. I've seen this movie so many times. So I want to, you had to make the movie, you got rid of the life you knew, you jumped into it, you created this, you got halfway through it, you've been filming all around the world, you created your first cut, and you're going, oh my God, I got bupkis here. What am I doing? You had this idea of going out, and I think it's one of the most charming parts of the whole movie is how you use kids within it, because really it's talking to that child and all of us.
Right.
The stories we're on. And I'll often tell my workshop, folks, when I ask them who in here are good storytellers, I'll be lucky to get 10% of the room to raise their hand. And I'll say, well, what if I told you were actually at the tops of your games in kindergarten and it's just been silenced? And there's actually a way to reignite this in you. And, your movie is a good example of how to do that. But when did you know you had it? So you went to that second round of the edits. You added these new clips of the kids in here to help bring some more metaphor and some more tales of story to it. When did you know that you really had something special?
I knew I had something special from the second we cut together the first story with the kids in it, it's the story that Gay Hendricks told. It's not in the film, about it's a classic fable about pushing a rock up a hill. One guy's pushing a rock up a hill and he's like, what are you doing? I'm just pushing this rock up this hill. This sucks. And this other guy's pushing a rock up a hill, and this traveler comes along and says, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm building a cathedral up on that hill. So it was this great, I reenacted that on this white psych stage with these kids in costumes. We cut that together in a few hours and went, oh my God, this is it. I remember the moment exactly. Like the whole movie fell into my head. Like it was the most amazing creative experience I think I've ever had. The whole film kind of unfolded in my head, and I saw where all the points of the journey were, and I could see where the dragon was going to go, and how the interviews fit together. It was unbelievable, that moment.
Which I think is a testament to how story is a fractal of itself. And a fractal being something very small or something large, but they have the exact same form. So it took this little story, this tale of two guys pushing a rock up a hill and framing it differently in their own minds to help you with the overall structure of the movie you were making about story structure.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And yeah, you're right. Stories are fractal in that way.
It's like a hall of mirrors.
It's funny you said that, because the film was very much like cutting a hall of mirrors. Like every time we cut, another point of the journey all the other points are reflected in that cut. And we're like, wait a minute, we would get lost. Like, are we cutting the beginning or are we cutting the end? We're not sure. It was this really kind of surreal moments happening in there because of the fractal nature of the material that you're talking about.
And I've found that unintentionally, but I think maybe again, finding Joe helped clarify that in my mind, that when I first started using story structure, and we've got this 10-step process called the story cycle, which is totally based off of Campbell's 17-step hero's journey, or 16-step, whoever, you want to believe in that process. But we first used it, honestly, Patrick, for just overall brand strategy. Try to understand the story of the brand, but what I found to be even more powerful were the people that were a part of those branding sessions would come out to me, and they would start using it for their own leadership. They would start thinking about, well, wait a minute, before we dial in this brand, I think we have to have a better understanding of what our own personal stories are as it relates to the brand. So I did a bit of a move and added that to it. And now every session I start with everyone sitting around the room, and they have to get clear and straight about what is their authentic story as to why they're here, why they are working with this brand, and where on their journey are they in relation to this brand story. Not until we get all that written down and they share it with the room do we even start talking about the brand story. But then we use the exact same process to uncover the brand story. And then we use the exact same process to uncover the employee story as it relates to the brand. And then we use the exact same process to uncover the customer journey with the brand, and then weave all of those together to figure out where the plot points work, where they don't work, where the gaps are, where they need to be bridged, and how you can build some synchronicity within all of these stories. But it goes back to that fractal nature of story that's so fascinating.
It's actually is really fascinating.
Yeah, and the fact that you had to use it when you were lost within that your own story about story, you use story to get you found in your story.
Yep, exactly. That's pretty much very well put.
It's fascinating, and I think it just underscores how well it works. It's been around since the beginning of recorded time, and it's still extraordinarily powerful today, especially in this high-tech world that we've created, which is really designed to outshout people, to cover up stories. And when you're not using a story in this crazy world, you're just not connecting.
It's true. And just a more info on that point to me, and in Campbell's work anyway, it feels to me like it's your human brain. Your brain is designed to accept and understand the world in terms of stories. You can't understand a bunch of jumbled facts. If it's brought to you in a clear story, you're able to understand exactly what it is that's happening, and so those things stick in your mind more. The better stories are the ones you remember.
Mm-hmm. And you think about it, that's why we are all still around today, is our brain is here for the survival of the being, to use story to create meaning out of the world going on around us. So I like to do this juxtaposition. You as a filmmaker in this day and age may call it, setup, problem, resolution. The caveman would call it, uh-huh, uh-oh,
ah. Yeah, exactly.
So not a whole lot has changed.
Yeah, not a whole lot has changed. It might feel like it because you're on a computer, but they were doing it many, many thousands of years ago.
Now, Pat, you're saying that you are starting to see Joseph Campbell and his work and the hero's journey popping up more in the world of advertising, marketing, and surfing. Is that right?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. I have a friend who is in the marketing world who he recently followed his Bliss and shut down his design firm and took a staff job, which I don't think he's ever had in his life, with the World Surf League, who is a new company who took over the World Surf Tour. And he came to me with a project. And the reason why he came to me, he said, look, when I started with the company, we were entrenched in Joseph Campbell's version of the hero's journey. And, all the marketing there kind of goes through this process of it's a hero's journeys process, and what is our personal journey, and on our message is a story, and it's very much Campbell's work that's influencing this. So I'm calling you to pitch this job. I didn't get the job, but we did pitch.
But it's great how they're bringing in the philosophy of story.
It's what blew me away. I went, because I've heard that, everyone talks about their story and how are we going to brand around our story, and how are we going to create a compelling story that's going to stick in our audience's minds. But these guys were very clear about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell's version of the hero's journey, and it was very specific to that, which I was extremely I was blown away by.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up, Pat, with the story of the Golden Buddha. You feature prominently in the movie, and how does that relate to all of us as storytellers?
Do you want me to tell the story, or just
go for
okay, great. So the story in the movie goes that there was in Thailand there was this statue of the Golden Buddha, and at some point a neighboring army came to invade the country, and they were looting the gold and looting the villages, and so the local monks at the village went, okay, let's cover our Golden Buddha in concrete. And sure enough, the army comes through, and they look around, they take everything else, but they leave the statue alone because they think it's in concrete. And many, many years go by, and the concrete begins to fade, and generations go by, and pretty soon nobody even remembers that this thing is gold. And then more generations go by, and one day this monk is sitting at the base of the Buddha praying, and a little piece breaks off and reveals the gold underneath. And he goes and gets his monk friends and says, hey, there's the Buddha's gold, and the Buddha's gold. And they run over and they chip it away with their picks and hacks, and they go, oh my God, the Buddha is golden. And the metaphor in the movie is that we are all golden by nature. We are all meant to be following our bliss. We are all empowered with, the energy of the universe and the Christ story and the Buddha story. But at a young age, we get told, oh, you're not supposed to act like this, or you're supposed to act like that, and black people are supposed to act like this, and smart people are supposed to act like this, and we get covered in concrete as our journey goes along, and we kind of forget by the time we're adults that we're actually golden underneath there. And so part of your journey as an adult, or mine anyway, is to kind of continually chip away at that concrete and armor and understand that you're actually a golden Buddha.
And I think that was one of my inspirations of letting the folks know that, look, you do have this golden Buddha of a storyteller within you. It just simply has been silenced over through our education system, corporate constructs, political constructs, you name it. And when you read about Joseph Campbell and follow an intentional structured story, you can have really a tremendous impact in your own life and the lives that you touch. All right. Well, Pat, I can't thank you enough for being here on Business of Story with us today. It's just nice to meet you this way. Next time I'm over in Hollywood visiting our motion graphics son, Parker Howell, I'll jump over
you
and
absolutely
see you.
Should. I'd love to take you for a coffee or lunch or whatever on me. And if you need any films or downloads or whatever, please feel free to reach out to me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And where can people learn more about you and find
Yes. Go to findingjoethemovie.com. And there's some little downloads on there. You can check out the trailer, and you can purchase the download or the rental or the DVD or whatever you want right there.
Yeah, and here's my recommendation. Here's what I did anyways, is I ended up buying 10 of them, I think. Had them shipped home. I've got one at home. And then I hand it out to people that are really important to me in my world and say, here's just something to have around when you get a chance. Watch it with your friends and your family and your kids. And it's just got a really terrific message to it. Finding Joe the Movie.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Pat, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here in this edition of Business of Story. Please return next week when we will have another amazing story artist like Pat Solomon on the show. And until then, if you get a chance, jump over to iTunes, give us a rating on the show, let us know what you think. I really appreciate it. It helps us share it with the world. And if you need assistance in finding and understanding your own business leader story or your brand story, please visit me at businessofstory.com. I have a full utility belt of storytelling tips, techniques, insights to help really reignite that one true superpower we all have and reignite within you the power of story. So until next Monday, have a wonderful life.
Thanks for tuning in to The Business of Story. Don't forget there are terrific free storytelling resources for you at thebusinessofstory.com, where you'll also find the complete show archive. The Business of Story is sponsored by Oracle Marketing Cloud, Park & Co., Sixter, Zignal Labs, and ACT, and is produced by Convince and Convert Media. Find more great shows like The Business of Story at marketingpodcasts.com, the first search engine for marketing podcasts. Podcast imaging by AudioBag.com.